There we go. So let's get to the defensive side of the ball. Again, I think it's so much of the one-on-one stuff is important. So we'll talk pass rushers, we'll talk secondary, and we'll just give 2 seconds on linebackers that might have something to show. But let's start with the pass rushers. This is always your specialty, Mike. You've got your, you love the trench play, love the D-line play. Mm-hmm. Give me some names to watch as far as pass rushers go.
I think Montez Sweat, we already touched on him, Mississippi State edge rusher. He could feasibly be the first guy drafted of anyone down in Mobile. He's 6'5", 6'6", in that range, 35-inch arms, extremely long, little stiff, not the most explosive, but his bull rush was one of the best in college football this past year. Had a ton of sacks there at Mississippi State. Definitely a guy to keep an eye on. I will say I don't see him as a first rounder. I don't even see him as a second rounder at this point. I think he is limited in terms of what he can do athletically. When he went up against a stronger offensive tackle, like I mentioned, the Dalton Risner game, he, for the most part, got shut down. I think his length will only get him so far at the next level. I don't see him being a plus sort of pass rusher that you take early.
So I agree with you on not first round, in part because of how many other edge rushers he's competing with and just how many defensive players along the defensive line that are going to show up in the first round. But the grades match that as well. We were talking a low 80s PFF grade, which just doesn't. And it's just not dominant enough.
He was part of a heavy rotation there. He was pretty much always fresh. Played a little over 50% of the snaps there at Mississippi State. So he's not like a guy like Zach Allen, where he's just not coming off the field and you're going to have bad reps because, you're tired at some point in the game. He was always fresh and still did not produce at the level you would like to see.
Well, let's discuss Zach Allen from Boston College. Because he's one of the guys that, we talk every day about who you're watching, what are you seeing, and yesterday you're saying it's Zach Allen first round.
Zach Allen first round. I wholly believe that. I'm not saying top of the first round. I'm not sure he's an elite talent. He's not exceptional athletically, but he is as strong as it gets in this defensive line class. He's a plug-and-play run defender right away, which, again, doesn't have a ton of value, but it is still has some, and I do think as a pass rusher, he's already fairly well advanced. He had a big year this past year, even though the sacks didn't really tell the whole story. But he, did not come off the field. He played 107 snaps against Wake Forest early in the year, which is absurd. Now, his last 10 snaps in that game, it looked like he had played 107 snaps. He was just completely ineffective. But the fact that he played that many in and of itself was pretty absurd. Almost 90% of the snaps the last 2 seasons he's played. I think he is just a guy that is going to, he might not wow you too much, but I think he's going to be a solid NFL player.
So, yeah, he came into the year with a very good run defense grade. People were talking about him as a potential first-round player, and we said, look, we want to see that step forward as a pass rusher, and he made it. He did take it this past year. 280 pounds at defensive end. Like you said, that oversized D end. And when we talk about safe players,
versatile, and that has some versatility because he still can hold up on the outside and then kick inside as well.
Well, the safety part of it, like you said, is like if you're at least getting a good run defender out of it, that just mitigates a little bit of the risk. If you're at least going to get some quality snaps out of a guy, even though it's not what you want, so a team that wants to be a little bit on the safer side might want a guy like Zach Allen. Let's discuss some of the undersized guys. O'Shane Zimenez from Old Dominion and Sutton Smith from Northern Illinois. 2 guys who graded really well in our system for multiple years as pass rushers, as run defenders, especially Sutton Smith. Both guys coming in under Zimenez was 241, was it? And Sutton Smith at 234. What do we do with these guys?
That is too. If you are not a freak athletically, if you're not Von Miller athletically, if you're not at that level, you can't play in the NFL under 240. You just can't play every down in the NFL at 245, and it's not going to translate nearly as well because everyone at tackle is long enough. Everyone's just good enough to where you see a lot of their wins in college, and no one even touches them because they're so quick, so much quicker than those offensive tackles. No one's getting clean strikes on them. Anytime you do get hit by an offensive lineman in the pros, it just deadens those sort of guys. They just don't have enough. They don't have enough counters. You don't have the bull rush for them to fear, and all they have to do is just stand in front of you. And I just don't think that's going to translate for either of them.
Yeah, so they both graded extremely well. Hit or miss. Sutton Smith, more of an off-ball linebacker here. They're letting him pass rush a little bit, but they're trying to see him as an off-ball linebacker. These are the types of players, though, if I'm an NFL GM, we believe in our grades. We believe in our grades translating at the next level. There's obviously certain athleticism thresholds that are probably important. We're still studying all this stuff, Mike, right? There's still a lot to look into here. These are the types of guys I would look at in the middle rounds, though, and say, okay, can I make something of them? Because if my whole thing with the undersized rushers, a Sutton Smith or a Zimenez, can they do enough as an off-ball linebacker? Can they be a sub-package player?
Yeah.
Can they be a guy where if I can scheme them up against a running back after they beat college tackles over and over again, can they be effective in that role? I think that's where you have to look at these guys.
That is, the prototype for that was Joe Schobert, who turned from edge rusher, 3-4 outside linebacker at Wisconsin to off-ball linebacker, and is now one of the best off-ball linebackers in the NFL because it's still, at the end of the day, taking out blocks. It's still football. That's still a good majority of your interactions as an off-ball linebacker, so he's still going to be good at that, but he's just not going to be – they're not going to be good at going one-on-one against an offensive tackle who's 6'8" with 36-inch arms.
And the thing I always say about pass rusher, there's 32 teams. There's 64 pass rushers. You have to be one of the best 64 pass rushers in the world, right? And you have all of these NFL prototypes and guys doing it. It's tough to crack that top 64, so to speak, and just in broad terms for these guys. But I think there are roles for these guys, and it's an interesting week for them to see what they do against these NFL tackles when given a shot. Anyone else as far as the D-line
Well, I think
goes?
we've got to mention Jalen Ferguson as well, who's another. I think he just gets into this category himself because he's
Louisiana Tech.
With 256, 6'4", I just don't see him being. He didn't have anything but a bull rush in college. That was his one move, and he is explosive. He's a poor man's Marcus Davenport in that regard, but Marcus Davenport ran a 4.59, I think, at the
freakish,
combine, and had 36-inch arms and was 265 pounds. This is a poor man's version of that, which Marcus Davenport still struggled to consistently bull rush at the NFL level right away. I don't necessarily see Ferguson, who I think he broke the NCAA sack record because of how good he was at that level. He needs to either add another move, which I'm not sure he's necessarily capable of, or he might be an off-ball guy himself. I think he's a mid-round guy as well.
More of a mid-round type of guy. And then, as far as the big boys in the middle, Dalen Mack had a few reps that really stood out. He's a Texas A&M kid, had a really good true freshman year. He's a 5-star player. If you go check out his highlight film on YouTube, it's him as a running back, a 300-plus pound running back. It's spectacular, but he was really an underachieving 5-star player at Texas A&M, but he had a couple eye-popping reps this week as far as showing his power and little fire hydrant type of bull rush,
Yeah, he is interesting because he's sort of quick in a small space, but then once you see him in space a little, it doesn't look nearly as quick. It looks a lot slower. He's not going to test well athletically by any means. Reminds me a lot of Andrew Billings coming out, the Baylor defensive tackle, who I just think you're going to be limited in the NFL in terms of what you can do. Now, he can bull rush. He bull rushed, Ross Pierschbacher back a handful of times this week. He's showed that he can do that, but at the same time, I'm not sure I don't think he's nearly as good as Vito Vea was coming out. We saw how much he struggled to consistently bull rush. He's just different at the NFL level, and he is a guy who's going to be very limited athletically, Mac.
All right, let's. Any other defense? Anybody we miss?
Isaiah Buggs is an interesting name from Alabama because
he shrank like 3 inches.
2-gap there a lot at Alabama, and he's not necessarily projects as a 2-gapper because he's 295 and has really short arms, so that's not what he's going to do at the NFL level. He's looked better in the one-on-ones from what I've seen in terms of when he just gets to penetrate. He looks like a different player than from what we saw at Alabama, so that's an interesting name to just keep an eye on who could move up because he's been fairly solid this week.
Those Alabama guys are tough sometimes because, they're asked to do slightly different things than what they're going to do at the NFL level. And most of their big defensive tackles have at least been productive at the NFL level, not necessarily all superstars. We do think Quinnen Williams will change that this year. All right, let's get to the secondary. The more we talk, the more we study. This is the most important position on the defensive side of the ball. Cornerback, the most important position. Do you see all the leaks with the Browns this week, by the way? Did you see their little... their mantras? It was their guardrails. They called them the Browns guardrails. Did you see that at all?
Okay, I didn't. I didn't get that far in the article.
So it was a leaked.
I have no patience.
It was a leaked image, right? Okay. And I'm assuming this came from like Sashi Brown, and it's got quotes from Deepa Desta, and it's like, here's what we're looking for in the draft. Here's how we want to build a team. It's kind of like their axioms, things to live by. And there's a section there, and it says positional value: QB, cornerback, pass rusher.
Really?
Confirming the stuff that our data nerds have been saying.
But so that's weird to me because my biggest criticism of Sashi Brown that whole era was they drafted one cornerback.
Yeah, well,
all those picks.
Maybe they updated this after he left. I don't know, but it leaked. Either way, it leaked. It may have come from
whatever that
Podesta.
was. But that was my biggest criticism of that whole era, is that they never addressed corner, and they really did have. Maybe that was intentional. Maybe they were like, we want to stink, so let's not even address corner.
And then we address it when we get the right guys. Well, then last year we kept saying Denzel Ward over Bradley Chubb. That's the right move. They did it. So they finally did start to live by it last year. So the point is, cornerbacks extremely valuable, but they're also tough to find sometimes. Correct. So anybody, who are we looking at this week with as far as corners go, who can really turn some heads?
Rock Ya-Sin.
Temple.
Chris Boyd.
Yeah. Texas.
Amani Oruwariye.
Oh, you got it that time.
Those are the
Penn State.
3 guys who have graded extremely well for us this past season. The latter 2, Boyd and Oruwariye, fantastic length, fantastic size.
They both feel like some projection is there.
Some projection, but Oruwariye is very smooth for a guy 6'1" with 33-inch arms. That is prototypical size and the prototypical sort of hip flipping ability that you like out of the corner position.
Have seen some really good ball skills from him at his time at Penn State. Rock Ya-Sin, really just a breakout year for him at Temple. There's some reps with him and Penny Hart going at it head-to-head that were pretty good. So when you see Rock Ya-Sin, who's got some pretty good size himself, going up against some shiftier receivers and sticking with them, had some nice reps against Anthony Johnson as well, the Buffalo receiver that we talked about earlier. Chris Boyd was just so hit or miss at Texas.
Yeah.
He had a game in 2017, and I heard other analysts say, man, if you guys watch that game, it's the best cornerback game you'll see, and it was like a 90-plus grade in our system, but he just had so many games in the 60s as well. So there's so much inconsistency with Chris Boyd. I would say buyer beware on him, only because if you do watch the right game or the wrong game, it's going to skew perception one way or the other. That's
I agree with that.
My thought there on Boyd. Anybody else? Or, we've also got Nasir Adderley from Delaware.
Yeah, the safety class is interesting.
Yeah. So we have some safety. I mean, he's taken some corner reps as well, because these guys are always going to interchange, and he took some corner reps at Delaware as well. Do you think he's just such a freak athlete that he could play corner, or somebody's going to look at him at corner at the next level?
I think he could. I think he did there at Delaware for some of his time. I think he is a freak athlete to what he can do, but I think I'd rather put that. There's so many freak athletes at corner, and they're crap out. If a guy has the safety ball skills to be able to make plays like that, I think it's more valuable at safety.
So Adderley's highlight reel, and again, we're not highlight scouting. We're actually going to do full grading, I believe, on Adderley soon at Delaware. So we'll have more grades and numbers. But if you just look at some of his high-end plays and his ball tracking ability and the back end, just fantastic stuff. We won't necessarily be able to see it this week unless he has an opportunity in the game on 20 or 25 snaps. But that's one of the things that teams should certainly be looking at from him.
Yes, I do think he has that sort of highlight reel ability that not a lot of the safeties coming out, you say, he can play quarters. He can, sometimes come down and cover the slot, but they can't go from the middle of the field to the edge of the field. That, I think, is the most, valuable thing that you can do at the safety position.
What about the rest of the safeties? Any other interesting names? I think it's becoming more of a value position. I don't know what the numbers are showing, but when you look at what Derwin James and Jamal Adams can do, when you have the all-around safety that can truly do it all, cover tight ends and do all these different things, I think there is a ton of value if you're really good at it. So
I like Darnell Savage, I'll say, from Maryland. He hasn't done great in the one-on-ones. Now he's only been a handful, only 6 reps that we have him graded on, but I think he plays extremely fast. You see him reacting to underneath stuff very quickly, comes up and is a big hitter. I like what I've seen from him. Graded out fairly well the past few years in our system. Never elite, but I think there's traits there that I'm a big fan of.
Going back to corner real quick, if your team is still just enamored with 6'2" plus corners, there's Isaiah Johnson and Lonnie Johnson. Isaiah Johnson from Houston, who has really struggled in one-on-ones, and then Lonnie Johnson from Kentucky. Kentucky was rolling 2 6'3" corners out there this year.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got a prototype. We talk about Josh Allen being a top 5 potential pick there. Kentucky's added some very good defensive talent to that defense over the last couple of years. They were trotting 2 guys out there, Derek Beatty as well, but Lonnie Johnson's here in 6'2", 6'3", with some pretty good length and grading well.
Lonnie has won, exactly. Won the most reps of any corner or safety in the one-on-ones this year. So that's something to look at.
Kentucky also has a couple safeties here as well. So Mike Edwards had a pretty good career there.
There's a reason
as well.
they had a career that Kentucky was back, and it might be short-lived.
Probably going to drop off quite a bit next year. Sorry, Kentucky football fans. I know there's a ton of you watching here. Anything else to wrap up the defense? I wanted to touch on a couple linebackers. Do you have any other defensive backs?
No, I think that's about it. Linebackers, similar to, you're not going to see much in the way of run defense. Maybe in the team drills you get a handful of plays, but that's really, I mean, it's tough to discern. Again, we've seen them over 500 snaps against the run. You can see what they've done against the run already.
Right.
The coverage, the one-on-ones, they don't even get that many to do one-on-ones.
They don't. It's still, if I'm going to watch something, that's what I want to watch. Tavon Coney from Notre Dame, Cameron Smith from USC. They're both guys who are kind of like, I feel good about them as run stopper. I feel good about them in the run game. Coney had a really good coverage grade last year, but the way Notre Dame's playing, it's a lot of like just close on the stuff underneath. It's not a whole lot of one-on-ones, right? So
and
just want to see.
He's not a freak athlete.
Right. So I just want to see what their athleticism looks like in this setting, because Cameron Smith, I have concerns about him athletically as well. So for me, it's kind of watching Coney and Cameron Smith in space, what their athleticism looks like against some pretty good athletes at running back. All right, so that'll do it for our defensive preview.